Hello and welcome back to Bookish, and welcome to my July wrap-up and my August TBR. Just going to talk quickly about the books that I read in July as quickly as I can, and then introduce the books I plan on reading in August. Now, some of these books will be ebooks and some of these books were ebooks, so I do have my list of books on my phone. I had a really good month of reading in July, probably I think the best I've had all year, not just in terms of the number of books I read, but in how much I enjoyed the books I read. So to begin with, for Jane Austen July, I listened to both Emma and Mansfield Park, thus kind of completing the 6 major novels, I guess, of Jane Austen. And I really enjoyed Emma, and I thought Mansfield Park was good. And I think I discussed both of those in a video I made where I ranked Jane Austen's novels in my estimation, but really good. Jane Austen July. I really enjoyed it, and I'm looking forward to then next Jane Austen July. I plan to read some Jane biographies and stuff like that because I really want to do that. Also, I read Freshwater by Akwaeke and Emezi. This was a buddy read that I did with Erica over at the Broken Spine, and we haven't had our last check-in yet. We probably will by the time this video goes up, but so I won't say a whole lot about Freshwater here, except that what I would say is I liked it. And I'll say I liked it, and I thought it was powerful and moving, but I don't think it's a novel that is without flaws and didn't kind of leave me with questions. But like I said, I want to talk to Erica about that before I share much more about that. And that was an ebook that I read on my Kindle. So I don't have a copy of it, but hopefully I've put a picture of it over here over my left shoulder. Also as an ebook, I read the last book in Jon Dos Passos' USA trilogy, and that is The Big Money. This is a buddy read I did with Jack, The Rambling Raconteur. We read one of the 3 novels in the USA trilogy by Dos Passos each month beginning in May. And so we finished up this month. I will say it is a relief to be done, and I don't say that without really feeling that Dos Passos' USA trilogy, and in lots of ways The Big Money in particular, are kind of works of genius. That there's a real modernist kind of genius touch to these works. Now, the books are uneven. If we're talking about the 3 books in the trilogy, they're uneven in the sense that the middle book, 1919, really is the weaker partner of the other 2 books. And it's not, Jack and I have exchanged our thoughts about this, so I can tell you, as Jack pointed out, it's not because, you know, book 1 is necessarily, or in this case, the 42nd parallel is necessarily so much about world building, and then the second book, like in a fantasy trilogy, just kind of like carries the action till you can get to the events of the 3rd book. It really just is weaker. I've pointed this out before, but the novels essentially exist or contain 4 different elements. So each of the 3 novels in the USA trilogy, 42nd parallel, 1919, The Big Money, contain 4 elements. One are narrative threads where you follow one character and their adventures, their misadventures, the tragedies or problems that exist in their lives. And over the course of the 3 books, we're introduced to, I would guess, somewhere around a dozen such characters, some whose storylines fade away, some who come back, and to a certain extent, in some ways, a little bit of a different set of characters. There are always new characters being introduced. To me, those narrative sections are the weakest part of the novel, and they don't really do anything, I think, other than to display all the ways in which American society had of kind of destroying people and of kind of stamping people down who are trying to make things better or who are just trying to live their lives. And then there's a newsreel section with headlines and snippets from newspaper stories, which Jack and I aren't sure whether they're real or if Dos Passos made them up. There are camera eye sections, which are kind of first-person perspective, tempting to call them stream of consciousness, but I don't think they really are, which kind of puts you inside the head of someone who's living through some of these events. And then there are these really brilliant biographies of important figures in American history from the last part of the 19th century through to the early part of the 20th century. And to me, those are the strongest, consistently strongest elements of the book. But the combination of those give you this kind of impression of how Dos Passos viewed the United States, the flaws, the weaknesses, the problems that exist in the United States during the time period. And in that way, I think they are pretty brilliant. I also finished a book that I had started reading in April or May, and that was The Heartbeat of Wounded Knee by David Treuer. I've talked about this in more depth before, but this was good to reread. In my response to the Faulkner August 2021 tag, I mentioned Nick Esses's Our History is the Future as kind of a book, kind of like a call to action for First Nations people and for their allies to try to help First Nations people protect their land rights, protect their water in the case of the Dakota Access Pipeline. And it's a very strident, more militant version of the story of Native American history, particularly focusing on the 20th and early 21st century. The Heartbeat of Wounded Knee, I think, is a little more optimistic about adaptation and First Nations, Native American people figuring out how to adapt to and live within and succeed in American society in lots of ways, but I really thought this was good as well. And then I have, I think here, yes, I have 4 novels. One of those was Vertigo by W.G. Sebald. This is the 4th of Sebald's novels that I read. He only wrote 4. I did a whole review of this, which I'll try to link in the end notes maybe, or if I can remember how to do that card thing, I'll put it up there. W.G. Sebald is one of my favorite writers, and one of the things this book reminded me of, and a lot of my reading this month reminds me of, is that a lot of times I seem to read books and really enjoy books that I have a hard time explaining. Just thinking about it, I think at least 2 of my favorite books, 3 of my favorite books of the year so far are books I haven't reviewed, but I still plan to review, but I haven't reviewed them specifically, devoted a whole video to reviewing them, because I think that I still not sure I have a good grasp on those, and you'll see more of that here in a minute. But this was just another great W.G. Sebald book. If you've read any Sebald, perhaps with the exception of Austerlitz, this falls into the same pattern as those. Really like that. I also then recently finished the second book, and then volumes 3, 4, and 5 of Jon Fosse's Septology. This is called I Is Another. Continues the story that he began in The Other Name, which was volumes 1 and 2 in the Septology, and I was really excited to read this, and I just absolutely loved it. I think I liked The Other Name better, but we get to know the main character, Asli here, a lot better, and we get to meet kind of his doppelganger, the other person with the same name and a very similar life. And it's just beautiful writing. The story itself is interesting and complex, but the writing is just so beautiful. Fosse really makes you care about Asli, about the other Asli, about his life. You feel bad when he's sad. You worry about his health. You worry about his mental health. You worry about him still grieving for the loss of his wife. You have lodged in your memory the things that happened to him when he was a boy and a young man that were scarring and damaging. We see him here in I Is Another as a teenager and a young man in school, kind of dealing with a lot of those issues and remembering them as a much older man. It just is almost indescribable, I think, but beautiful. The only disappointing thing about this is that the last 2 volumes in this series will not be available to me here in the United States until March, which means I have to wait, what is that, almost more than 6 months to finish up that the Septology, which is going to be a really long wait for me, but maybe I'll reread the first 2 books before then. I also read Panenka by Ronan Hession. You may remember Ronan Hession is the author of Leonard and Hungry Paul, one of my favorite books of last year. This is a shorter novel, and in lots of ways I think a more tightly focused novel on one character and how events from his past affected his life, affected his daughter's life, his marriage, affect his future relationships. It is, as is true with Leonard and Hungry Paul, it is a novel about regular people and regular lives, and occasionally maybe an extraordinary event and its impact, and how that kind of spreads out, and how we who lead those lives, who have those events happen to us, who maybe make those mistakes, have to deal with them and try to heal people afterwards. I thought it was very, very good. I still think I like Leonard and Hungry Paul better, but I did enjoy Panenka quite a bit. And then right here at the end of July, I was able to fit in at night All Blood is Black by David Diop. And my goodness, this is so good and so dense and so packed with thematic threads. And it fools you because you start off and it's about a Senegalese soldier who is fighting with the French army as a part of a Senegalese unit with the French army in the trenches of World War I, whose best friend, his more than a brother as he refers to him, is killed, and our main character essentially sits with him while he dies over a really long period of time. He then goes on a murderous streak, and that's mostly what you hear from people about the book, and that's all you're going to hear from me about it here. This is one of those books which I think is going to be in my top 10 books of the year at the end of the year, and a book I will have a difficult time reviewing without giving away too much. This is one of those books where if you you know, like books that are dense with thematic stuff and yet still tell an engaging story, that are still written, I think, quite beautifully and purposely written a certain way. There is so much here that I couldn't begin to describe it in a wrap-up video. But if you get a chance to read this book, I really recommend that you do. It is violent. It is brutal. The way in which the soldiers treat women and talk about and make comparisons to women are intentionally provocative, are intentionally designed to, I think, communicate kind of the horror, the numbness, the lack of humanity of war, of perhaps the main character who tells most of the story. It is just a brilliant book, and so I'm highly recommending that book, and hopefully I'll be able to get my thoughts together and do a review. Marc Nash talked about this book on his channel. If I can remember if I can find the video it was in, I'll leave a link to that if you want a better idea about the book than I just gave you. Okay, so that then brings me to my TBR for August. August is Faulkner in August. This year's Faulkner in August choice was Sanctuary. By the time you see this, we'll be about ready for our first check-in, but if you want to join us for Faulkner in August, I will leave my Voxer handle down below in the show notes, and you can send me a Voxer message and I will add you to our group chat, which is really lively. I'm filming this a couple of days early, but right now we're talking about we're talking about regional food, and everybody's really hungry. Which has very little to do with the book, but that has been a lot of fun, and lots of people are in that group and are really excited about reading it. If you're interested, please do that. I'll be talking more about this either in a video I put up about the first reading section, which covers chapters 1 through 8. That video will go up either on Sunday or Monday, depending when I get a chance to film. But I've already started reading that. I'm also, this month in March, I'm going to read, or attempt to read, Marc Nash's new book, Stories We Tell Our Children. Marc Nash, BookTube's own Marc Nash, new novel is out. I'm excited about getting to read that. For Women in Translation Month, I will be reading Convenience Store Woman by Sayaka Murata, and translated from the Japanese by Jenny Tapley Takamori. I think I'm probably the last person on BookTube to get to this book, but that is one book I wanted to read for Winter in Translation Month, and I may be able to fit another book in. I'm also this month going to be reading Ghost in the Throat. I've actually already started this book by Doireann, which she is an Irish writer, Irish poet, and I think I heard about this book on Sean the Book Maniac's channel, and I'm really looking forward to getting into it. I have started reading it, and I like it. I like a lot of things about it. It is an interesting novel, which basically essentially tells the story of a young mother's kind of history with an old Irish keening poem. Anyway, I'm really interested in that. It seemed like an interesting structure, and I think I heard about this on Sean's channel, so I definitely want to get to that. This is also the History Challenge month. I think that's the last 2 weeks. I just saw a bite go by, sorry. The last 2 weeks of the month, I think, are the History Challenge. I'm going to read one history book, and that is Forget the Alamo, The Rise and Fall of an American Myth by Bryan Burrough, Chris Tomlinson, and Jason Stafford. This book I bought on a flash because it's this book that the Lieutenant Governor of Texas barred the Texas Historical Museum from having a discussion about, because he decided this book was so anti-Texas that we couldn't possibly let people talk about it, because God knows, you got to fight them commies by censoring stuff. Anyway, so I bought this and I'm going to read this for the History Challenge. Also, if I have time, I'm going to try to get to Quiet Flows the Una by Faruk Sehic, translated from the Bosnian by Will Firth. I saw this book on Jen from Remember Reed's channel, and she talked about it, and it has stuff to do with fishing and also to do with a young man's experiences, I believe, during the Bosnian Civil War that took place in the 90s, and it really seemed like an interesting book to me, so I want to be able to get to that this month. And then if I can slip in another book by a woman in translation from Winter Translations month, I will, but I think pretty much that's my TBR for August. If you're reading these books, you have any thoughts about any of these books or anything I said, please leave a comment in the comment section down below, and as always, thank you for watching.